Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right. So happy Uposatha, everybody. And we come together, do a little extra practice on this Friday evening. And at the very least, this is an extension of our regular daily practice. But uh, more so, it's also the opportunity to do a little bit extra. And it's nice to give ourselves these opportunities. And so the Uposatha is just, it, as the Buddha said, the most auspicious day is the day we commit ourselves to practice. But if it helps to mark a sort of Sabbath or a day of the week or a day of the fortnight where we give a little extra, and it's really not asking much, yeah, just a little extra consideration, taking the precepts formally, and then this opportunity to gather to offer a reflection. And I was recently, just yesterday, I was out walking in the woods, and it was cold and it was after a rainstorm, and I was walking along, and I was noting that the ground was uneven. The wind was whipping through the bare trees, and it's cold, and everything's kind of damp and icy, and there's rocks and sticks, and I'm kind of picking my way through the forest and really appreciating having some warm layers on, really appreciating having a pair of sandals to keep from stepping on the stones and the pine cones and everything, and being able to work my way around the thorns. And then it occurred to me that back in the Buddhist day, actually, when the Buddha was teaching in the central Ganges Valley, a lot of the early monastic rules were designed around um, sort of keeping the monks from falling back on comforts like shoes, like extra clothing, like extra meals, and sleep and bedding and all of these things, because that's when it really began. It was the most austere and dedicated practitioners, and it was only over time and as the Buddha's dispensation spread beyond the Ganges Valley, where that's even like humanly possible. When it has to be a certain temperature year round for be able to go with minimal clothing. You have to have kind of flat, uh, dusty ground to be able to walk barefoot. It's when Buddhism spread further out, they had to make concessions. But in the early days, yeah, you walked barefoot. You had scraps of cloth, to protect you against the wind and the sun and the rain and bugs. And so as I was walking through the forest, I'm thinking, yeah, if I didn't have shoes, if I didn't have extra clothing, this would be a pretty miserable experience. I thought, well, that would basically be the experience of a squirrel or a deer or a fox. Yeah. They don't have a choice. They can't put on shoes. And that is the reality. I was allowing my mind to kind of come in contact with what I was actually stepping on, where I actually was. And if we usually start a meditation, and when I'm giving guidance, that's usually how I start it. Like before, lock in, zero in, find the breath, count in, count out, 1 2 1 2 1 2, kind of ignore the world. The first thing I do is like, whoa, like, where are you? What time of day is it? How does your body feel? I find it's very easy for us to create this kind of comfortable little level of separation from the world that we live in and the circumstances we're actually facing. And that kind of runs counter to what this is really all about. Yeah. So we really want to be in contact with the world. We really want to be experiencing it so we can process where it is we find ourselves and why all of this matters. Thinking back and reflecting on the year and all the different themes that practice has taken me through, and then thinking of all the reflections I've been able to offer. So I've been doing these posted programs for 2 years now, um, since we were immersed in a pandemic where everybody was locked down, and the computer was the only way to really connect with other Buddhists, straight through to spending all the time in the woods, and then shifting locations. And I was thinking back, and one thing that's happened again and again is, as I'm talking to groups of new practitioners, groups of casual practitioners, people who kind of meld their Buddhist practice with their yoga practice, I find, more often than not, upon reflection, I'm kind of like trying to sell the Dhamma. I'm trying to make it sound like this is a good idea, like this is very healthy. This is going to, mindfulness is so wonderful. It's so great not being, taking the precepts and not being immersed in, all the struggles of life. And I'm trying to talk about all the things you can gain, like samadhi is so wonderful and blissful. Isn't it great to be concentrated? Isn't it great to be not distracted? I'm really trying to sell it. Yeah. I'm trying to inspire people, encourage them. It's like, yeah, this is hard, but keep going. It gets better. Every day it gets better. And I was thinking back on it, and maybe it's because I'm here staying with family in New Jersey. So you've got New Jersey, you've got family. These things, kind of weigh the mind in the direction of life is suffering. This is awful. And it's thinking on that, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of, I'm not feeling like selling it this evening. Like I wanted to actually give a little space here at the end of the year to remind everybody that practice is not necessarily a great idea. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to make you feel better. Mindfulness might be excruciating. Yeah. You might really not want to be in contact with the world that you live in. Yeah. You might look around and be like, I hate this. I hate where I live. I hate the people I'm around. I try my best to forget about it. And that's why I meditate. And that might sound a little strange, but part of it links back to kind of what's my background, to blur out much more cluttered backgrounds that exists in reality behind me. This is what we call the wheel of samsara. So in Tibetan art, they depict the six classical realms of existence for living beings, in this tanka, and it's a sort of, it's a teaching tool, yeah. And it shows you all these different states, and you can't see the hell realms. I'm kind of obscuring them, and I don't think I can get out of the way. But you see the animal realm down here, and you see the hungry ghosts, the pettas, and you see the human realm here. It's like, well, that doesn't look so bad, and it's compared to the ghosts and compared to the animals that are all trying to eat each other, it's the human realm is actually in the upper tier. As strange as it sounds, with all their famine and war and pestilence and death. And then you have Deva realms, and then up there with the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is the Brahma realm, the realm of the gods. Yeah. And coming in contact with the reality that we're in sometimes reminds us that the Buddhist practice isn't at its core aspirational. We don't do it because it feels good. We don't do it because it brings good things into our lives. Though I'm often talking about that, we're often going over that and relating to each other in that way. It's like, oh, yes, I was able to put some extra time on the meditation cushion, or oh, yay, I kept the precepts, and we're all patting each other on the back. And it's like, you kept the 8 precepts today. Way to go. I did too. This is fun. Um, but it's funny to think that for most of Buddhist history, that just wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't fun necessarily to be a Buddhist practitioner, and the fact that I honestly feel that Buddhist practice brings wonderful things into your life, and I have this is not faith, this is not belief. I have absolute confidence in this because I've been able to track Buddhist practitioners over the course of years, moving into decades. And I have seen that those who dedicate themselves to it and who are steady in it, their life gets progressively better, and they go through all kinds of awful stuff, but they rebound so much more quickly, and they're able to put up with it, and they're able to have a context for it. And it's amazing to think that even though I'm confident that Buddhist practice brings good things into your life, that is incidental, that is not the point, that's not why we do it. Yeah. And that if you ever find that you're kind of confused about what it is why it is you're doing this day after day, month after month, you can just see if you're trying to get something out of it. And you can, maybe think back to this and get reminded that no, that's not why you do it. Yeah. The reason actually the Buddha taught about the Four Noble Truths and he taught about suffering is because suffering is why we do it. Yeah. If I were to tell you that practice is going to be painful, like every step of the way, it's going to be like, pulling off your fingernails. You're going to be subjected to uncomfortable sensations and hunger and cold. You're going to sit long hours with an aching back. Nevertheless, some of you would still do it. Why? Well, because you're not doing it because it's pleasant. You're doing it because you have to. And I think that gets to the core of what Buddhist practice really is dealing with. And what happens when we sort of stop and we sort of take off our shoes and we step on the pebbles and we take off our nice nylon jacket and we feel the wind whipping through the trees and cutting us down to the bone, and we're like, oh yeah, samsara is awful. And that is why we practice. Yeah. We live such comfortable lives, such sheltered lives. We sort of choose, we opt into our modes of practice, who we want to practice with, what kind of Dhamma we want to listen to. And for most of history, there hasn't even been an option. Like if you were lucky enough to hear the Dhamma, you had one or two people who even had the slightest bit of realization or had even heard the Dhamma, and you apprenticed under them. And it didn't matter if they were nutballs. This was your only access to the Dhamma. You didn't get to choose what Sangha you were in. Like, you humbled yourself. They made you sit in front of the gate for a day and a night without food or water or encouragement. In fact, they'd come out and they'd shout at you, go, go, we don't need any more mouths to feed, go. And it's only if you put up with all that, they're like, okay, this person is willing to endure hardship for the Dhamma. They get it. You can come in, but as long as you keep up that intensity, as long as you see that the suffering outside the walls of the monastery is greater than any suffering you're going to experience in the walls of the monastery. And that's really what it's getting down to. Like if you pause for a minute and you kind of look around your environment, you might be able to, if you attune yourself to it, you might be able to sense how your mind recoils again and again from the reality. It's like, oh, there's a pile of junk there. I really wish I could get that more, organized. Or you might be like, oh, that really needs to be repaired. Or it's like, oh, well, this is where I live. I really thought I'd be, like Elon Musk right now. I really thought I would have made it. I'd be established. But this is what I've got after all of the work I've done. Really seems like I'm just barely scraping by. And the funny thing is everybody feels that way. Even rich people, if they really stop, it's funny to think that they're even more likely to be dissatisfied because they actually got what they worked so hard for, and it's not that great. Yeah. They're on the yacht surrounded by people who are, drinking their fancy drinks and talking about their fancy clothes, and they're looking around and they're like, these are the kind of people I got to be with day in and day out. Isn't it? why did I want this? Yeah. To say nothing of the people who are, working, 80-hour work weeks to scrape by in this human realm. And we can come in contact with it and realize that our mind recoils. And then that's actually useful. Yeah, it should, right? This realm that we live in is not actually great. It's not actually pleasant. Yeah. And it's not supposed to be. I could tell you it's wonderful. Become mindful and you're going to have love and kindness towards everything. You're going to practice renunciation. It's going to be like cool water washing over your body. And I can say these things and you might have these experiences, but again, that's not why we do it. We do it because in these moments when we allow ourselves to settle, to really take it in, we can sense dukkha, and we can sense this unhappiness that is pervasive in our experience. We know that we're getting older. We know that our time here is limited, and that, when our time comes and we pass away, this wheel of samsara behind me becomes a kind of roulette wheel, and we give it a spin. And where are we going to land next? Yeah. And even if you're not willing to take on rebirth, you're not willing to take on these ideas, I think that anybody who's really serious about practice probably has already come to the realization that, it's that death is probably not the end. Yeah. There's probably going to be something after that. But you have to recognize there's consequences. Yeah. And that it's a kind of mature thing to be able to take that on. Like, you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know if this crazy Tibetan, wheel of samsara is in any way reflective of the cosmos we live in. And in fact, you might be pretty sure that it's not. You're like, oh, this is hokey, and devas and brahmas and hell realms. It's too folklory. It's too mystical. Yeah, I can't sign on for it. Nevertheless, if you have any willingness to kind of come in contact with your reality, you might see that your reality is already kind of mystical in a way. Yeah. Like we like to think that it's very scientific, that it's all cut and dry, that the world is, it makes sense. But we really look at it like, why do people do what they do? Why do stop signs have 8 sides? And, why do trees grow up? And, why is water wet? This is really mysterious. Yeah. Why things are the way that they are. Like, I was, when you're walking down the street in New Jersey, you get a lot more looks than you do when you're walking down the street in Massachusetts. And I'm not sure if it's different demographics or just people are more compressed. Like, when I'm walking down the street in New Jersey, I'm looking at other people and I'm like, you wear that in public. But it's funny because everybody's looking at me and they're like, what is wrong with you? You're trying to make a statement? You're a weirdo? What is going on? And it's like looking around and it's like, there is nothing that a human being could wear that is not weird. And doesn't, if you really stop and think about it, like, why do we wear the stuff that we wear? Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we greet each other and we say hello? What does hello mean? What does it mean? How do you do? How are you? And it's like, this is a greeting, but why? I don't care. Whatever you do, please don't tell me how you are. Yeah. But we say these things and we have these customs. And sometimes it's good to just ask why, and to realize that there's a lot of things that we have to take for granted in order to function. Yeah. We'd go insane if we stopped and thought about a lot of it. But that our world is kind of funny and funky and weird. And there's all these parts of it that we either can't understand or we just don't. Yeah. We just take for granted and we just assume there's a good reason for it. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's a good reason for it. And samsara is really just, it's just trying to let us know that, yeah, the cosmos is vast, but it's the one thing that you can rely on is that it's full of unpleasantness. It's full of suffering, no matter where you land in this samsaric game of roulette. There's going to be an experience of discomfort because you're going to have to spin the wheel again and again and again and again. Yeah. And so however good you might have it, maybe you are secretly a billionaire and you're just logging into this because yeah, you have some free time and you might hear something interesting. But most of us are just processing, day after day. We have pains, we have loss, we have discomfort, we have people like we have politics and people like working, undermining us and working against us and insulting us and all of these things. And that's why we practice. Yeah. And it's a good thing, in fact. It's a useful thing. And when we reflect on it, then we know why we reflect on things. We know why the Buddha taught in this way. We understand how we even got into this in the first place. We probably didn't, get interested in the Dhamma because we thought it was going to make our lives better. We probably got interested because, you know, we were trying to get away from, something that was actually making our lives miserable. Yeah. We went through a relationship breakup, or our health started to decline, or we got to middle age and we started to have our midlife crisis, and it was like, what is this? Yeah. And then it occurred to us that there has to be a way out of this. Like, I'm miserable and I can understand that the misery is not external. Like, a lot of these things have happened to me before. We realized the misery was internal. And then we said, well, what do I do with this internal misery? And that's what the Dhamma is giving us the opportunity to do. I was thinking about it, it's not once or twice or even three times. It's like multiple times. I have heard people who like got into Buddhist practice back in the day, like before I was born. They got into Buddhist practice. They've been doing this for 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. And then they say something like, I've been doing this meditation on breath just the way I've been taught for the last 20 years. And I honestly don't know what I've gotten out of it. I don't think I've gotten anything out of it at all. Or they practiced in the way that their teacher taught them for like 25 years, and then they heard about jhana, and they realized their teacher didn't teach them about jhana or samadhi, these like deep, intense, pleasurable meditation states. And they're like, what is this? Why didn't I hear about this? And on one point, you're like, okay, yeah, it's fair. Your teacher kind of left that part off because they didn't want you to get confused. But another way, it's like, why should that be a big deal? And you realize that it's possible to practice for 30 or 40 or 50 years and think that your meditation is your practice. To think that you are measuring your practice by whether or not you can get your mind calm and still and, happy. But that is a completely conditioned phenomena. It falls away. And so even if you could get these states of samadhi, the second you go back into the world, immediately you're going to start losing them. Yeah, and you're going to have to go back again and again and again and get that happiness of a calm and peaceful mind through effort. And that's not what it's for. Yeah. This practice is not, about getting those happy, peaceful states. And it's like, that's so weird. It's like, no, those come along for the ride. Those are a tool. But what are they a tool of? Well, they're a tool of processing the suffering in our lives. Yeah. Because it's not the happiness we're getting, because again, like anything you get, you're going to lose. It's the unhappiness we're letting go of. And so when we turn it around and we see that our suffering is what motivates us, then we know exactly what it is we're working with. Yeah. And if we really, it's this funny thing to say, it's like 2 days before Christmas, but yeah, just like really let it sink in. Like, samsara sucks. We're really in an awful mess here. Because if you let it sink in, if you let yourself make contact with it, you might you might see what it is you've got to do, and it might become really like urgent what you've got to do. It's like talking to somebody about a book about aging, sickness, and death, and Rahul, you read the book, and the first thing you said is like, yeah, I've got a lot more samvega now, a lot more sense of urgency, yeah. And it's like, yeah, aging, sickness, and death. If you really think about them and how you're kind of immersed in them, in the way that I'm immersed in this wheel of samsara right now, then you're gonna be like, oh, I gotta process this. You're gonna feel it, and then you're gonna know what you have to practice. Yeah, it's like I have to be able to feel this. I have to be able to be in contact with this and not lose my mind. But more so, instead of like sitting down for meditation in the morning, you get a nice cup of coffee and we drink it and we sit down in our comfy sort of armrests here that you can't see. We sit down in our comfy little chair, and we've got our comfy meditation room with our comfy meditation timer and our comfy cat that's going to sit down next to us, and we get to watch the comfy sunrise, and everything's all how we want it. We're setting ourselves up for success. We're going to have a nice, calm meditation. We're going to get to some blissful state, and then we'll go out into crazy world. Yeah. But instead of like sitting down and trying to get ourselves into our happy place in the same way that my head is kind of floating in the Brahma realm right now, instead, what if we just sat down and really just made contact with the potential for suffering that might occur during the day? And we realize if so and so, slams that door one more time, I'm going to lose it. And like, that's what we should be reflecting on. Yeah. That is practice right there. How can we not lose it when because they're going to slam the door again? Because there's no objective measure of slamming the door. Yeah, there's intentionally slamming the door, but if somebody was intentionally slamming the door, that would be an intentional action. We'd probably say something about it. But most people just close the door loudly. Yeah, and they don't realize how it really gets to us. But that's the suffering, right? That's what we're working with. So we sit down and we say, what is the potential for suffering today? And we're like, well, if so and so closes that door really loud, I'm going to get miffed. And it's like, well, why? Like, make contact with that thing that triggers us, and then we'll know, like, oh, I've got anger. I've got the seed of anger within me. That's what I'm working with. Yeah, that's why I practice. That's why I began this whole weird Buddhist journey that got me to create a meditation room with candles and tankas and statues and reading all the bookcases full of Buddhist books. Yeah, that's what started me down this whole path of exploration. Was, how can I not get angry when that thing happens? If we do allow ourselves this reflection and this investigation, then we find that, okay, yeah, if we can not get angry when that thing happens, we will have already gotten the result of our practice. Even if we don't get to some samadhi state, or we're not filled with loving kindness, even if we're just filled with that ability to not get pissed off, that would be an accomplishment. We would have let go of suffering, and that is the real measure of success. Yeah, because even if we were to look at this wheel of samsara and sort of set our sights and was like, okay, yeah, I want to get up there. I want to be up in that happy place, and we practice day in and day out to get that. We, the thing about this wheel of samsara is, it's a convenient teaching tool, but the reality is, four of the realms overlap. They're all is you've got earth, and you're just kind of like pasting different layers of existence on them. And there are humans up here who live like animals, and there are animals like little Maltese lapdogs that live like humans. Yeah. And there are ghosts that occupy houses that people won't step foot in. Yeah, and there are devas that occupy trees, and try and keep the squirrels from taking over the place and making a mess of it. Yeah, and there's all just one big mess. So it really doesn't matter when you spin the samsaric wheel where you land. You're still going to have this mix of experiences. Yeah? So the most important thing we can do is not to set up our practice so that it's comfortable and pleasant and enjoyable, and we try and get everything. We try and be with the group of people that we like, and we try and read the books that we like, and we try to hear the Dhamma that we like. Because some of you, I don't know, all the people I can see, you haven't tuned me out, you haven't turned off your video, you haven't gone and made a piece of toast and just like, okay, yeah, when he starts talking about jhana, I'll start listening again. But we're going to put the recording up, and maybe some people will have tuned out by now. I mean, everybody who sticks with it, you probably, because you get it, because you hear about suffering and you hear about samsara as a mess, and you're like, wow, I don't know what it is, but that makes me feel better. It reminds me that it's not my fault. Yeah, it reminds me that it's your fault. Yeah, you're the reason this is a mess, and I can let you go, right? I can let all of you go. And that's wonderful, because I can do that without having to set up the perfect meditation nook, or get my neighbor to stop making noise, or get my cat to stop like getting in my lap and rolling around and purring and like disrupting my meditation. We don't have to change anything. We just let that external stuff go. And so I say, even if I told you that this practice is going to be unpleasant, many of you would still do it. I'm not fooling around. That's the Buddha's own simile, Is if we could realize stream entry, which is the point where we draw this line, yeah. At stream entry, you have understood the quality of samsara and suffering enough that you're never going to put in the conditions for future rebirth. Now, it takes some time to get out, because we've really invested a lot in it. But from that moment of stream entry, of the point of no return, where we've really seen the Four Noble Truths, we're not going to be born below this line. Yeah, not going to be reborn as an animal, as a ghost, or in the hell realm that you can't see, for better or for worse. It's very complicated. Trust me, there's all these little layers and little nooks and crevices and torture devices. But you can't be born there. Why? Because you can only be born there with, it's this funny to do in reverse, but greed, hatred, or delusion. You need a certain amount of greed, hatred, and delusion, and more importantly, the causes of the perpetuation of greed, hatred, and delusion to be reborn in those realms. Yeah. And you can, if you can just cut away the causes of perpetually increasing your greed, hatred, and delusion, then you just can't generate enough really stupid ideas to get you down there. Yeah, from the point of stream entry on, you're only going to be reborn in the upper realms. And again, it's still just, they're all kind of smashed together, right? So you can be reborn in the human realm as a stream enter, and it can still be pretty miserable. Just look at what happened to Tibet, and like, or things that have been going on in Burma, and it's like, yeah, even if you're reborn in a Buddhist place in human realm, it can still be pretty nasty, but you're going to get out. So the Buddha said that suppose you were offered a deal. You can wake up in the morning and you'll be tied to a post and stabbed with 100 spears. And then at lunchtime, you'll be tied to a post and stabbed with 100 spears. And in the evening, you'll be tied to a post and stabbed with 100 spears. Yet you're not going to die from this. And it's going to continue every day, day after day, for 100 years. And if, having undergone this particularly peculiar torture for 100 years, at the end of it, you were to be, released, and you were to attain stream entry. That is to cut off these lower three realms. Whoever offered you that deal, you should shake their hand. That's a good deal. Yeah, and that's how important suffering, stream entry is. Not that it's going to make your life more pleasant. I'm not going to guarantee that, because I can't guarantee that. In fact, I can guarantee the stream enters still experience plenty of unpleasant things. But because the amount of suffering that is on the side of non-stream entry is infinitely large, and the amount of suffering that remains on the side of stream entry is finite. It can be measured in terms of a mere handful of lifetimes, and then you're out because you're not generating any more lifetimes of misery. Yeah. The whole idea of permanence and infinite cycles has been cut out. And that's a weird metaphor. Is the Buddha saying, like, you might get, this come come join the Buddhist Sangha where you get stabbed with 100 spears day in and day out. But the funny thing is like, yeah, that you might your knees might hurt when you sit in meditation. Yeah, you might have to, the diet might be hard. Yeah, you might constantly be telling yourself, it's like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, and I shouldn't be watching movies, I shouldn't be using perfume, I shouldn't be, wearing fancy clothes, I should be sleeping on the floor. You'd be like, oh, I just wish I was more austere and intense. I'd get stream entry faster. But in reality, no, it comes down to that simple realization. Yeah, can you can you make that distinction between infinite suffering and finite suffering? And would you be willing to endure some difficulty, deprive yourself of, this ignorance is bliss notion? Yeah, would you be, instead of like setting your sights on the perfect nook, would you be willing to sit down and just come in contact with the reality of your life for a little while and realize it's not that great? No matter how much you've attained, yeah, it's worth getting out of. It's worth letting go of. Yeah. No matter how invested you are in you, you are worth letting go of. Yeah. It is easy for me to say, but again, you have to let go of you, because that's all that matters in the end. And that's what the stream enterer realizes. Yeah. Is that in the end, nobody can help them, and nobody will help them. In the end, when you spin this wheel, you're the one who lands there, and you don't get to take anybody with you. Yeah. And that's what you can feel every moment. If you just go off to the side and just stop for a minute, kick off your shoes and feel the ground, the little pebbles and stones and acorns and stuff. And yeah, ow. Yeah. And then realize this is your little corner of samsara at just this moment. Yeah. This is your reality, your experience. And do you want to do this forever? Forever and ever and ever and ever? And if you're like, yeah, you're right, no, then I think you're on the right track, whether or not you've got great samadhi. And as I said, I think I like the Sangha, I like the Dhamma, I like the Buddha. I think there's good chanting. I like the robes. You know, it's very stylish. We get to do. There actually is a lot of good things in the practice. And so for me, I think this is a sort of like you win both ways kind of scenario. Yeah. If you orient yourself based on suffering, and you're like, okay, day to day, it doesn't matter if I'm a mess. It doesn't matter if my meditation is awful. It doesn't matter if I'm working on basics. I'm going to work on basics. What is the anger I can let go of today? What is the greed I can let go of today? What is, one thing that I can maintain mindfulness of today? Then I think you're doing it. Yeah, you're not setting your sights on some pleasant state that you're going to get. You know, you're not patting yourself on the back all the time. You're really accepting humbly. I've got some work to do, so let's just do it. Let's do something. But you win either way, because the reality is it's a kind of pleasant way to be. And it's every time I think about it, it's like, yeah, samsara sucks. Yeah, we're all gonna die. It is curiously reassuring. Yeah. And I think that the more you get into it, the more you realize that this is our inheritance, yeah, as Buddhist practitioners. Even though we've arrived in this particular weird place and time where we are pretty comfortable, we have a lot of options. We can choose our Dhamma, we can choose our practice style, we can choose even our wallpapers. um, Nevertheless, the practice hasn't changed, and its core is realizing what gets to us and trying to let it go. And in that, we're all connected in a funny little way, and we're all getting better through trying not to get worse. Okay? All right, so these are some thoughts on this Uposatha evening. I hope in some way this has been of use and helped orient yourself in this crazy samsara we find ourselves in. And even if you're not going to take on the particular folklore map, just step off to the side and take a look, and you'll see, it is still a mess. Yeah, and it's worth letting go of. And I hope you have some success with that. Yeah. All right. So offer these thoughts for your reflection this evening.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.